I just wanted to play Kid Icarus Uprising again. Remember Kid Icarus? Nintendo, I'm talking to you. Do you remember Kid Icarus? Alright, listen, I get it. Zelda, Pokemon, Mario, it is foolish to expect friggin' Star Tropics to be talked about in the same breath, but there's always gonna be a few of those franchises where you sit back and think to yourself, what if? As we celebrate the 35th anniversary of Metroid, I figured now is as good a time as any to talk about another NES classic that released that same year. That's right, I'm talking about Urban Champion. Listen, a sequel would be pretty cool. If you really think about it, it could be some really good stuff, but instead, today, we're not going to do that. We're going to talk about Kid Icarus instead. It released in '86 in Japan, '87 everywhere else, but hey, close enough. Like I said, I kind of just wanted to play Uprising again. What a strange series Kid Icarus is. Only 3 games over its entire history with a massive 20-year gap in between 2 of them, and a good portion of you out there just said, wait, there's a Game Boy game? There really isn't much to this franchise. The original is okay, it's a platformer that starts off with a totally vertical level and slightly slippery controls, where one fall brings you right to the beginning. I'll be honest, took me years to realize there was actually a level 2. Sometimes rooms have vases in them, sometimes they have noses, sometimes you enter a shop filled with items that you can't afford. The Game Boy sequel, Kid Icarus of Myths and Monsters, is kinda better, but I don't know, man, I just don't think these are for me. It controls better, and there is a novelty to having a game like this on the Game Boy, but I don't know. Cool aesthetic, but not something I could really get into. And why in both games do they stock items that are too expensive for you? I don't understand. Wait, crouching changes the items? After those 2 titles came and went, we didn't really get a whole lot of anything. We got Pit to show up as a trophy in Melee. That's it. Regarding today's game, Uprising, well, not much has really happened since its release, outside of merely existing in Smash Bros, but it doesn't feel like that long ago when said existence in Smash Bros is what kicked off a massive resurgence of interest. After being upgraded from Trophy to Fighter in Brawl, people started talking, leading to Nintendo using this relatively niche series as a title to showcase the power of their new handheld, the 3DS. By the way, with the trailer that is still, by all accounts, incredible. The voice acting for Pit is different and not as good, so that's a bit jarring, but still, really, really good stuff. And besides, the trailer starts off with "Sorry to keep you waiting." That was genius.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
This really was a massive jump from the last time he showed up in a game where all he did was yell hi-ya-ya-ya-ya a lot. Super Mario 3D Land, Ocarina of Time, Star Fox 64 3D, all great games that do take advantage of the console's power, but the scope of Kid Icarus Uprising, it just seemed too good to be true. They were clearly putting a lot of faith into this angel, and at the end of the day, it sold well, reviewed really well, and it only hurts a little bit to actually play, so why does it still feel like this game is so underappreciated? It's a stupid question, actually. It's because Nintendo never acknowledges it. The hype behind this game was wild, man. It wasn't just because the debut trailer was cool. It wasn't just because it got a spotlight that one time Nintendo did really awesome things with unnaturally shaped screens. It was because all of this was helmed by my favorite Kirby creator and yours, Masahiro Sakurai. I gotta tell you, before Pit showed up in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, I really didn't even know Kid Icarus existed. I didn't really care that much about the trophies in Melee to go, oh, that's a thing I should look into. It was just a guy. This all took place right before the big retro game boom of the late 2000s, and sure, more people did get to experience Kid Icarus on the Virtual Console during that time, but Sakurai kinda decided to revive Pit just because he could. And that simple inclusion in Smash generated a lot of interest and a lot of conversation in the idea of a brand new game. But years came and went, and we got nothing. Sakurai even started an entirely new company after Brawl's release, Project Sora. That's pretty strange, I wonder what they're working on. Come to find out, that team was created for the sole purpose of making that new Kid Icarus game. And once that was all said and done and the game was in people's hands, Project Sora closed its doors, and Sakurai went back to working on Smash. Absolute legend. Oh, and Nintendo was definitely not messing around when it came to building up excitement for the game either. Releasing alongside Uprising and also acting as a bonus for pre-orders, we got a pseudo remake of the NES game under the 3D Classics brand. You remember these? Yeah, at this time Nintendo figured a way to show off the 3DS's 3D was to polish up some NES games. And it was pretty neat while it lasted. In this case, it is just the same game with some new graphics and maybe kinda better controls. I'm not sure I was actually able to beat this one, but oh man, you take one look at what they did to Urban Champion. Oh, 1 second the camera does this, and then the camera does this. Whoa. The 3D Classics line is also responsible for giving us arguably the definitive way to play Kirby's Adventure, so maybe I'm just biased in this regard. There were also 3 animated shorts, each coming from a different studio, showcasing very different art styles and totally different stories. This was really awesome too. They gave these cute little looks into the universe that they were trying to build back up, and they still hold up today. They are really entertaining. They did the same thing with Pikmin years later with the Pikmin short movies, and they were great as well. Man, it really goes to show you that under the right people, Nintendo series adapts to cartoons really well.
Well, excuse...
Under the right people. At the time, in the late 2000s, Nintendo was really keen on reviving old franchises. Wario Land, Punch-Out, Pilot Wings, Excitebike with 3 games, but undoubtedly, while it was kind of expected at this point, Kid Icarus was made the biggest deal of them all, and that's awesome. It even got a big box release. Oh, you gotta love those. A soundtrack is included, I bet. The music has to be pretty good. The hell is this? A stand came included with the game? That's really weird. Why would I need that? Oh. Going into this adventure, it was kinda hard to know what to expect. Nintendo had no shortage of trailers to let people know what Uprising was all about, but I'll be honest, they had me sold on it just being a Kid Icarus game in the year 2011. I was ready for anything. But when you do dive in, you discover you can mess around with all the buttons on the main menu. That is an easy way to get me totally invested. The console's battery level is also visible at all times too. I forgot about that part. Yeah, at all times in the game, that little box right there is gonna let you know how good your battery is, no matter what. You can't turn it off. To my knowledge, no other 3DS game does that. I mean, Star Fox 64 3D actually does do it as well, but at least there, it doesn't show up on the actual gameplay, it's just on the bottom screen. Why is this like the only game that does this? And also, the console itself does a pretty good job letting you know, so why waste the screen space? But okay, we're finally playing here. One tutorial segment later, we are in, and oh, it feels good to be back. So, Kid Icarus Uprising has 2 distinct gameplay styles. Air battles, which are basically fast-paced, enemy-filled roller coasters where you dart around the screen to avoid obstacles and aim your reticle with the touchscreen to shoot at enemies. And then there's land battles, which slow things down, give you more full control, and plays more like a third-person shooter hack-and-slash hybrid. I often see people compare the air combat style to Star Fox, which is kinda fair, but it also shows how few people out there have played Sin and Punishment, because it's the exact same thing, just more colorful. There's this mechanic in Kid Icarus where if you tap the fire button, you will swing the weapon before firing it, allowing you to hit enemies when they're up close to you. Sin and Punishment has the exact same thing. Basically, I'm just saying you should all play Star Successor. That's all I ask. That game's amazing as well. Both of these gameplay styles feel really satisfying when you get a good grasp of things, but that's where the main talking point with Uprising finally comes in. Playing this game, at times, can be legitimately physically painful. Holding the 3DS up with one hand, constantly maneuvering the circle pad and pressing the fire button at the same time while the other hand feverishly scrubs the touchscreen. Yeah, that part kinda sucks. And that's strictly with the lighter original 3DS model. When the XL comes into the picture, with it being slightly heavier, any control issues just get amplified. And that is why the game came included with a stand. You prop the 3DS on it while you play, and theoretically it is meant to alleviate some of the pressure. Personally though, I don't think this is comfortable at all. Technically, you don't need to play with the touchscreen. You can use the face buttons to move the reticle around as well, but with how frantic the action can be, that lack of precision is far from ideal. It's like when they added touchscreen support to Mario 64 on the DS. Not good. And even when the 3DS finally got a second analog nub, you remember the Circle Pad Pro? Probably not. Here it is. The game never got updated to support it, and again, dual analog may not have been the most ideal, but it would have been a really good second option. It's just a shame that the controls are holding the game back as much as they do, especially in the advent of current age where gyro controls are all the rage, and they are awesome. Can you imagine Kid Icarus Uprising with gyro aiming? It would be so good. Would probably need some fine tuning, but hey, I'm optimistic. Point being, if you can figure out how to position the system and you feel like you're in full control, damn, Kid Icarus Uprising feels really good. Bobbing and weaving around an army of enemies and watching them all explode with a bunch of hearts flying all over the place. It never gets old. And this is partially due to how much freedom you have when you go into these chapters. So many weapons, dude, like holy cow, you have so many weapon options, from floating orbs to bow and arrows. You got claws that typically do great for melee combat. There are these big chunky cannons, oh, and so much more. And each one also has its own set of unique attributes. You may have two of the same name, but they may provide entirely different benefits. And then we have weapon fusion, which I don't know, maybe there's a science to this, but I kind of just press a bunch of buttons on two weapons that look like the outcome is going to give me a higher number than the two weapons going into it, and then hey, I'm done. I'm going to use this now. It's like I'm fusing personas. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, but I'm having a damn fun time doing it. Usually when a game has a bunch of different weapons, I'm always curious about what the ultimate one could be, but that's the thing with this game. There is no definitive best weapon, and that is probably for the best. You just play how you want to play and have fun. It's as simple as that. Clearly, Sakurai wanted to prioritize you having fun and not having the pressure of trying to go for an ultimate goal, and hey, that's alright by me. On top of all of that, you also have full control over how difficult you want the game to be. Yes, the difficulty slider that we would eventually see in Smash Bros, it debuted here. I have mentioned before that I don't really think that bar makes a ton of sense in Smash because it's really hard to quantify the difference between 7.2 and 7.3 aside from the final point score, but here there is a lot more at stake. The amount of enemies change, how fast they attack changes, how much damage you take changes, how many hearts you gain at the end of the chapter changes, which by the way, that can factor into buying more weapons, which is important. And there's also these optional challenge gates that will only open up if you're at that specific level or higher at that point in the chapter. Being able to visualize all those differences really shows the weight of your choice in the difficulty that you choose. So yeah, Kid Icarus did it better than Smash. And on top of that, once again, there is also a full set of 3 challenge boards. Completing specific chapters with specific weapons or specific difficulties, maybe under a specific time limit. There are so many challenges that you can go for if you want to play the game over and over and over again. Going from start to finish is only part of the adventure here. The amount of replayability just throughout this 25 chapter campaign is absurd. But is that all really worth it if the health of your wrist is on the line? Yeah, I would say so. It is very easy to compare all of these features to the variety of content you can find in Smash Bros, but I would more so relate this to Kirby's Air Ride instead. Another result of Masahiro Sakurai just letting his creativity flow and overloading the players with options, replayability, and most of all, fun. Also, kinda just wanted another reason to bring up Kirby's Air Ride. That game is still amazing. But when you really boil this game down to its most basic values, the gameplay could potentially run stale if it wasn't for the story, which, in my opinion, this may sound like hyperbole, is easily one of the best methods of storytelling in any Nintendo game ever. Doing something that you really don't see too often, practically all of the story beats take place during gameplay, managing to keep you invested in what you're doing without stopping you from actually playing the game. There are a few more traditional cutscenes here or there that are really well done and very nicely animated, mostly at the end of chapters, but nearly all of the dialogue and character interactions, they take place while you're dodging and shooting, letting you know why you are where you are and constantly blending comedic, serious, and fourth wall breaking tones all the time, and it never manages to interfere with the action. That is really impressive. Dude, there's this one moment where they start joking about brain age, like out of nowhere, and I had forgotten that brain age was a thing at this point, so this whole interaction is amazing. And speaking of the interactions, the cast of characters, man, is so good. Of course, you got Pit, who is a fantastic protagonist. You got his counterpart, Dark Pit, who goes way beyond just being a little basic edgelord version of Pit and actually justifies his existence in Smash way more than people give him credit for. You got Palutena, the goddess of light, who seems like she may be all threatening and imposing, but she's actually just a massive dork, and that's great. You got newcomer Viridi, who is a perfect chaotic neutral goddess of nature who really shines in the later half of the game where she gets a ton of screen time. You got the big bad guy, Hades. Oh man, the amount of snark coming from this man is relentless every time him and Pit interact. It's amazing. Viridi is one of the characters that shows up more than anybody actually, which is pretty wild considering one of her first actions is throwing and detonating a massive bomb in an attempt to extinguish all human life. Why yes, this would make a good stage in Smash. Oh, and this barely even scratches the surface of all the characters we have here. There are so many one-offs as well. New characters are thrown at you like every 20 minutes, and then when you move on to a new chapter, a new character comes in to talk to, and it keeps happening, and all of them are great. Nobody overstays their welcome either. They contribute just enough to the story, and then they move on. I will say though, the alien threat, the Aurum, they really didn't do anything for me. About halfway through the game, they kind of show up out of nowhere, and then after only 3 chapters, you take them all out, and they barely ever get mentioned again. Some of the enemy variants do pop up here or there, but that's about it. They mainly seem to serve as a decent jumping off point to the following arc, which was awesome, but as they stand, the Aurum themselves are kinda just whatever in my opinion. Pyron shows up during this arc, and he's kinda cool, but I got a feeling a lot of you forgot about this guy, and I think that speaks volumes. Everything about Kid Icarus Uprising shows what happens when Sakurai has full creative control of whatever it is he wants to do. The gameplay, options, the story, he knows exactly what the people want before anybody even knows that's what they want. Kid Icarus Uprising is a masterclass in how to execute a franchise reboot in fantastic fashion. Masahiro Sakurai managed to take a game from the world of relative obscurity and go absolutely wild with it. Even more impressive when you remember the original games are not that good. Gameplay mechanics, variety, character direction, storytelling, no matter how much time passes or will pass, this game will always be fantastic. I probably can't use my wrists to full capacity for a little bit, but hey, it was all worth it. In a time where Nintendo was rebooting dormant franchises left, right, and center, Kid Icarus easily got the best treatment of them all. And that is still absolutely crazy to say out loud. And yeah, of course, that's not even mentioning the multiplayer, which in early 2021 is still surprisingly active. That's awesome. The team-based mode, Light vs. Dark, is so cool. It's a really neat take on a typical 3v3 team deathmatch. Basically, each squad of 3 has a shared life bar, and when that life bar gets depleted, the player's death that caused that life bar to be depleted turns into either Pit or Dark Pit for their respective team. And only when they're defeated is when the opposing team wins. There is the option to do a more normal deathmatch mode here, but man, Light vs. Dark is so cool. And I don't necessarily mean to brag here, but according to the few games that I did play, it looks like I'm the best by a fairly large margin. Look at the numbers, I'm not lying to you. I'm just stating facts. Oh yeah, and then there's also the AR mode. Oh man, I forgot about this one. See, alongside the game, they also released a bunch of cards, and you can make the characters on them do battle using the special camera functionality of the 3DS. I mean, it's not good, but it's interesting. Thinking back to a time where Nintendo was doing some really weird things before settling on hard plastic, yeah, that part's pretty fun. So, after finally replaying this game, I'm gonna start echoing what all of you have been saying for years. It is time for a Kid Icarus Uprising port or sequel on an HD console. For the love of all that is holy, they're doing Miitopia. Why won't they do Kid Icarus? Now, Masahiro Sakurai has stated, it's on record, that he doesn't believe either of those two things will happen, but hey, I'm a gamer on the internet, so I'm not gonna listen. I'm gonna beg for it anyway. For now, my thought is that perhaps we'll see someone else besides me make another Kid Icarus in another 25 years. Alright, well, you heard it here first. Be sure to like this video and subscribe, because when the year 2046 comes around, I'll be here to talk about Kid Icarus Uprising 2. Hopefully. The Pikmin Trilogy, what a fantastic set of games they are. For a company that is often criticized for rarely creating big new IP, Nintendo developed quite an awesome universe about gathering up a plant-like army and strategizing with them to collect treasure and take down huge threatening insects. Sure, we did have to wait a while for Pikmin 3, but looking at all the final products, yeah man, it's great stuff. Now Pikmin 4 is on the way, if we're to believe the prophecy, but until then, you know, at least we have Pikmin short movies. Yeah, you know, you can't forget about this just randomly dropping on the Wii U and 3DS eShops. These were actually pretty cool. What we have here are 3 scenarios totaling roughly 20 minutes of animation, and it is really the first time that we get to see just a huge amount of charm that this universe can offer. I mean, like, one of the episodes is about the Pikmin fearing for their life because they think that Olimar is about to eat them. So I don't know if that one is charming necessarily, but aside from that, yeah, super charming. They use the Pikmin license without insulting the fan base. I know, such a rarity. I could watch hours and hours of this stuff. This is the sort of thing that Nintendo should do more often. So while Pikmin 4 remains in purgatory, Nintendo went ahead and gave us another game, this time on the 3DS. I'm pretty confident in saying this is a game that absolutely nobody asked for, so this was a nice gift from them, I guess. Welcome back to AlfPril, everybody. Today we're taking a look at, so far, the only portable Pikmin game. It's also the last time I have to say AlfPril, so that's really good news. Yeah, so like, did anybody play this game? It released months into the Switch's life, so at that point, I think people stopped caring about 3DS games. But, hey, you know, Pikmin hasn't really done me wrong just yet. Let's see how this first spin-off in the series fares. This adventure was developed by Zest, as opposed to being in-house Nintendo like the others. Yeah, those are the same people who made everybody's favorite 3DS game, Yoshi's New Island. People really like to rag on this game, but I don't know, I kinda liked it. It's not terrible, but ultimately it still doesn't leave for an awesome track record for the company. Now though, with Pikmin, this is a totally different style of game, so I guess we can go in with completely different expectations. This is something that's gonna be completely new and original, and we should go into it expecting as much. The story this time revolves around Olimar driving into a meteor and crash landing onto a planet. But okay, after we get past that little bit, the story is super basic. You crash land onto the planet, and you need to refill your fuel tank by collecting a whole bunch of this new substance, Sparklium, and find the missing component that allows your ship to return home. And at this point, you know, I would kind of figure that Hocotate Fright would have some sort of like insurance, workers' compensation, you know, something to help its employees out, but maybe they're still paying off their debt. That's all I got. So, if you know a thing or two about portable Nintendo games, you may remember Kirby Mass Attack. Of course you do. It's that one Kirby game where tons of people said that the gameplay style could probably work as a Pikmin game. Well, clearly somebody listened, because instead of converting the traditional Pikmin gameplay to a portable console, we have our first ever 2D side-scrolling Pikmin adventure. Now, inherently, this eliminates a lot of what made Pikmin great in the first place. Rather than dealing with full, expansive worlds, we are working with a more traditional level format, where your primary goal is to simply get from point A to point B, as well as explore just a little bit to search for some treasure. It's also one of the few 3DS games that goes for the original DS thing of splitting up the gameplay between both screens, instead of relegating one to like a map or something. And I gotta give the game credit here, this is one of my favorite things about the DS line of systems. As a result of this shift in gameplay, there is next to no level of strategy here. Each stage has you start with 0 Pikmin, with the maximum potential being 20, and the types that you have access to are preset, as the gimmicks and hazards that you come across are built to use specific Pikmin. You never have to worry about choosing who goes in your army like you do in the other games. Also, that's not his voice. His voice is way deeper than that. 0 out of 10, not faithful enough to the deep Pikmin lore. Despite these changes though, the core idea kinda remains the same. You work with what you're handed, and you gotta practice quick reflexes in order to thrive and survive. And also have a mastery of the touchscreen controls, that is a thing as well. And I have to say, it's actually pretty satisfying. Similar to using the Wiimote in the other games where you point at where you want the Pikmin to go and then throw them there, it's almost just as satisfying to tap the screen and then see them fly there. Even though we're working with only 2 dimensions now, it still feels pretty good. This time around, our army consists of the Pikmin 3 crew with no real changes. There are the reds for fire, yellows for electricity and higher platforms, blues for water, rocks for glass, and winged for flying. Still no Bulbamin though. Rest in peace. So with no real reason to keep your mind active at all times, the game instead tries to have variety by using the platformer approach of giving each stage a bit of a unique theme. Some of them are returning from earlier games, and some of them brand new. There's picking up and using bombs, there's dealing with specific enemies that tower over you, being held by winged Pikmin in a windstorm, that's one of my favorite parts of the whole game, getting attacked from fire shooting enemies from off in the background. It's all pretty neat stuff, but the question is it fun? Kinda. With no strategy and not even much in the way of challenge, it almost feels as if the developers wanted to show off a bunch of cool ideas that they managed to cook up, rather than put you in front of obstacles that you're meant to overcome. Any substantial challenge comes from trying to keep your Pikmin alive, though it's not even that huge of a hassle since some parts of the level will just restock you anyway. Unless you get screwed right at the very end, which to be fair, is very possible, chances are pretty high that you'll end the level with the 20 maximum Pikmin. It's also pretty hard to care about them all that much when... Okay, so I cannot tell if this was intentional or not, but what was initially a joke in their debut, the bread bugs have become the face of absolute fear and despair. It's the damnedest thing, man. The game honestly has pretty solid hit detection all around, except for these carbohydrate insect tools. Oh man, a loaf of bread with a face that tries to play tug of war with the items. Ha ha ha, that's so cute. Now we make them the worst thing ever. At least the rest of the animals that you come in contact with are pretty cool. You got a whole bunch of new and returning foes, and they fit the revamped 2D Pikmin style just fine. And that goes for the bosses as well. At the end of each of the game's 8 worlds is a large boss fight. Honestly, they're pretty stupid easy. They have one super easy pattern that takes no time to discover, and then they go down in like a minute or two. It's a shame, really. You almost feel bad for them. They don't have a chance. But, to be fair, I guess if losing Pikmin to the bread bugs drives me to the brink of insanity, I almost prefer knowing that I can take these guys out in no time. You get rewarded for completing stages with no lost Pikmin, so the less crap that keeps me in the way from my gold star, the better. Ultimately, Hey Pikmin does a whole lot different, but there is still enough here that got translated over that it still does feel like a Pikmin game. Graphically, it looks okay, you know, not too terrible. They worked with what they got. There's some pretty solid lighting effects in a few levels. That was pretty nice to see. The soundtrack, also not too bad. Some catchy melodies. It's not as crazy as Pikmin 2's cave music was, but it's pretty good. The worst part about the entire package is the frame rate is shockingly poor. I will tell you this right now, do not play this game if you only have an original 3DS. Somehow, the game chugs on the original model, which is super disappointing. If you play this on any of the new 3DSs, it does still have some frame rate drops here and there, but it is at least playable. Nobody really expected a 2D Pikmin game to ever exist, but what we ended up getting, it's fine. It almost feels uninteresting to talk about. The game's just okay. You know, I see people hate this game a lot, but I think that's just because the game is different, therefore it's bad. But if you actually play it, it's alright. I had a good enough time with it. Despite doing some things that are pretty new, it also kind of feels safe at the same time. You have definitely never played something quite like it except for Kirby Mass Attack, but even then, you kind of know what to expect. Easily, my favorite part of the entire adventure is in an effort to make the Pikmin more charming than ever, you are bombarded with a bunch of short cutscenes that show off the little plant-like creatures just doing something cute. There are a ton of these, and sometimes even Olimar is involved. You honestly can't go 5 minutes of gameplay without seeing at least one of them, and you could argue that this is to make up for the repetitive gameplay, since when you do come across them, they're not skippable. And I think the intention was to have you forget that the game is basically exactly the same from title screen to credits. So, yeah, I guess they have a purpose. But even still, I loved these. I noticed that some people weren't really a fan of them, but I'm just a sucker for these cute little things. And since they just sit there being adorable in the main games, it's actually pretty cool to show off a bit of personality. Big fan. And aside from dealing with some repetition, the only problem that I have here is accessing the secret levels. You see, each world has 4 main levels and a boss fight, but within one of the normal levels, you can find a secret exit. But rather than truly rewarding exploration and experimentation, they are often sitting almost right next to the normal exits, meaning you have to play the levels in question at least twice if you want to get 100% completion. It's not Chibi Robo Ziplash levels as stupid stage progression, but it still kind of sucks. Aside from that, again, the game is pretty much fine and inoffensive. I would go as far to say it's good. So if you remember correctly, Olimar's goal is to gather a whole lot of Sparklium. Levels are filled to the brim with it. The treasure that you find give you a few hundred upon collection. There are these really short extra levels that are meant to just overload you with the stuff. There's this Pikmin park thing where all of the Pikmin that you've gathered on your adventure can be sent off to retrieve even more. A casual playthrough will give you the required amount by like halfway through, so you'll be fine. As you progress to your goal, you get some upgrades too, but they're all pretty minor. It's mainly just all a stopgap before getting to the ultimate goal of retrieving the vital ship part. After traversing through 8 sectors of everything trying to kill you, you're eventually led to the final stretch, the Fragment of Hope. So menacing. Here, we're greeted with the massive plant creature, the Berserk Leech Hydro. Damn, what a name. It's still pretty easy, but I gotta say, going back to the whole 2-screen thing, it does a wonder for these boss fights. They offer a sense of scale that is almost parallel to Pikmin 3, I would go as far as to say, and this massive thing, I mean, man, he's gigantic. But no matter how much I praise it, it is a very simple fight. You got a couple of phases, a lot of throwing Pikmin, and then it's defeated. As it turns out, the creature was actually just a normal plant transformed into a monster after being taken over by this parasitic leech that has been altered by the Sparklium Converter, the item that we've been looking for all this time. Cute! With your ship finally repaired, you and the Pikmin get to celebrate. You then say goodbye once again. Olimar ascends into the heavens and returns to his home planet peacefully, ending Hey Pikmin. There aren't really many extras in this one. There is amiibo support where you can collect Mario, Animal Crossing, and Splatoon figurines as treasure in the game after scanning them in. That's kinda cool. And we do sort of have the return of the Piclopedia in the form of just simple data logs. And man, whoever wrote these up really needs a promotion. This blue pellet creates blue Pikmin. Makes sense. I find them near water a lot, which also lines up. Alright, he's very observant. Their big eyes suggest that they have excellent vision, while the puckered lips indicate that they're good kissers? Alright, I think Olimar misses his wife. Maybe if I keep observing its behavior, I can begin to understand why my wife has a hard time throwing anything away. Okay, maybe not, I don't know. I still can't figure out if it's shy or if it's desperately seeking attention. Yeah, you may as well just go ahead and change that description from male sheargrub to YouTuber. The early 2010s were quite a good time to be a Kirby fan, with the combination of the artistic epic yarn and the return to form, Return to Dreamland. We were treated to 2 of the best games this series had ever seen in such a short amount of time. There was also Mass Attack. We'll get to the spin-offs later. And with the success of Return, naturally we were going to be seeing more Kirby games in the future. And while the Wii U didn't get any mainline Kirby games, the 3DS got 2. Starting off here with Kirby Triple Deluxe. No interesting development history this time around, it just sort of exists. So let's pop the cartridge in and give this a go now, shall we? It's another peaceful day in Dreamland. After some quality solo time, fishing, flying, and relaxing after a large apple meal, Kirby is just having the time of his life. Oh, yeah, that's right. Kirby is also legitimately a homeowner. They barely ever acknowledge this fact. I forgot it was even a thing. During his sleep, a beanstalk named the Dreamstalk, haha, starts growing out of nowhere, lifting his house high above the ground. Don't you just hate when that happens? King Dedede's castle was taken as well, and once Kirby gets to the castle, a mysterious spider creature, Taranza, ends up knocking out the Waddle Dee guard and kidnaps the king. So now Kirby goes into pursuit to save the king and find out just exactly what is going on. It's a really simple premise, but I mean, hey, it's a new plot with a new bad guy and a new setting. That works for me. I do want to mention that Dedede got a bit of a random redesign though. I don't know, did they think his eyes were too close together before? That's alright. I mean, he still looks fine. It's just weird. Now, right out of the gate, it is very apparent that this game is heavily based on the gameplay engine from Return to Dreamland. There's a stronger emphasis on jumping from one layer to another for an added element of 3D, but otherwise, the same traditional format is here. Run and float through all of the levels, find the game's main collectibles, the Sunstones, and just do that a bunch until you win. There are also these new keychains to collect as well, and they're pretty neat. Each one represents a different sprite from the Kirby series, and which one you get is given to you randomly upon the level's completion, except for the one more hard to find rare keychain in each level. Those are always a preset design and are typically saved for the final bosses of the respective games. It is just another collectible for the sake of having more stuff to collect, but it's an extra bit of fan service, and those rare keychains are actually pretty tough to find sometimes, so I think it's a pretty welcome addition. The bottom screen also has a minimal use similar to Squeak Squad, with the ability to store one extra health item for later use. It's obviously not much, but hey, when you're reckless in Kirby games like I tend to be, it can really come in handy. And of course, what is a Kirby game without a bunch of copy abilities? Thankfully, they're all handled the same way they were in Return to Dreamland, meaning each one has multiple attacks, equating to maximum fun. Sounds like I'm doing a sales pitch. A couple of them have been scrapped since the last adventure, including Water, already getting the axe. But added to the group this time are 4 brand new ones. Perfect your piercing shot with Archer. Become an insect and stab your enemies to extinction with your giant horn with Beetle. Blast out everyone's eardrums or bash their heads in with Bell. And Circus. I don't even have a brief description for this one. Juggling bowling pins, inflating balloons, jumping through fire hoops. This one is just wild. Honestly, Circus I'm not the biggest fan of since it controls a bit too odd for my liking, but the other 3 are pretty sweet, especially Archer. Destroying enemies with a barrage of endless arrows? It feels good. A trio of extra tools show up along the way as well, each one adding a bit more 3D to the action. Shooting cannonballs to another layer, a laser beam that affects every layer at once, and a pretty sweet missile that lets you plot your strikes from the foreground. They each add a bit of diversity to the level designs like before, so once again, pretty good stuff. And also like Return to Dreamland, we have a new game-wide gimmick in the form of the Hypernova. Many levels will lead you to a tree that bears miracle fruit, and after eating it, Kirby will start glowing a plethora of colors all at once, and with the simple push of a button, he inhales with the most powerful form of suck we have ever seen. A bit of an issue with these super abilities was every area practically felt the same. However, now, nearly every Hypernova area feels unique with something fresh to suck in. Tree creatures? Suck 'em in. Wrecking balls? Suck 'em in. Snowman heads that need to get back to their body that actually form a lovely snow couple? Suck 'em in. An oddly sexualized pink turnip? Why? There are no special interdimensional portals at the end of these sections, sadly, but overall, this is definitely a better idea than these super abilities. Hypernova feels more like a natural extension of Kirby's normal inhaling ability, so it works out really well, and more importantly, it's a lot of fun. The question then is, again, isn't this just more of the same, just now on a portable instead of a home console? And I'm not gonna lie, yeah, kinda. Guys, my fanboyism can only go so far. Yes, at this point, it's kinda safe to say that if you've played one Kirby game before, you've kinda played them all. Aside from the lack of co-op and slightly tighter controls, it really is more of the same. However, that doesn't really bother me. What it comes down to then are the level designs, which continue to be excellent, more unique ideas in levels than ever, spicing up the adventure with each passing stage, including some cute uses for motion control, and honestly, the use of colors. Far be it for me to say that graphics make a game, but just aesthetically, my goodness, this is one of the most pleasant games I have ever seen. The overall pastel color palette gives the game a unique image coming off of Return to Dreamland, and it looks fantastic. The Waddle Dees are also more adorable than ever before. Aw, just look at those little guys. The soundtrack is better as well. Coming off of Return's catchy ambience, the tunes this time feel a lot peppier and are arguably more suiting for a Kirby game in general. And all of this combined makes a game that, in my opinion, is way more fun than Return was. Like I said, at the time, that game felt nearly perfect, but in comparison, it ends up feeling a little bare at times. I would say Triple Deluxe is more consistently a better adventure. And of course, on top of that adventure are a couple of sub-games. In DDD Drum Dash, you control the king through 4 rhythm-based stages, bouncing off drums, avoiding enemies, and getting coins to maximize your score. And in Kirby Fighters, it's basically a Super Smash Bros. Clone with a bunch of different Kirby abilities and stages with exclusive gimmicks, hazards, and even some extra fan service. Both of these games have a bit more polish than the typical minigames the series has seen in the past, so much so that each one actually got a separate downloadable version on the eShop with some extra content. Dedede Drum Dash Deluxe has 7 new songs and a harder difficulty, and Kirby Fighters Deluxe has 2 more abilities, new battle types, new stages, and even new bosses. Each one also has new costumes, with Drum Dash having character masks, and Fighters has a costume variant for each ability. It is kinda cute, but it is all just aesthetics. And don't get me wrong, they are fun, but whether or not they're worth $7 each is really up to you. For a die-hard, unapologetic Kirby fanboy like myself, well, I mean, I didn't give it a second thought, I'm pretty shameless. And actually, these 2 more fleshed out subgames are the main reason why this title is called Triple Deluxe. Not just because Triple Deluxe 3D, haha. They kinda just went with the same approach as Superstar. The main game, Drum Dash, and Kirby Fighters, that's 3 games, Triple Deluxe. It's a bit of a far-fetched concept, and I think the wordplay with the 3D is a lot nicer, but hey, they're the developers, they make the decisions. Sure. Triple Deluxe also sees the return of the arena, acting as the same boss endurance mode that you've come to expect. And speaking of bosses, Wispy Woods doesn't return this time around. Instead, we have a bit of a counterpart that uses flowers instead, and his name is Flowery Woods. That's cute, that's adorable, it's keeping the woods spirit alive. And naturally, the true arena returns as well, which is the same arena, but with the harder bosses from the extra adventure. But see, that's where things get a bit interesting. The extra mode, rather than just being the original adventure again, but harder, this time we have Dedede Tour, or Dedede Detour. It's cute. This is a truncated form of the original game. However, this time you play as King Dedede, and it's pretty fun. It's really just like having the hammer ability at all times, and how can I possibly complain about that? Some enemies have more health, bosses have upgraded and more difficult forms, and the end of the game is actually completely different. After fighting the normal final boss, the Dimension Mirror shows up and summons a Shadow Dedede, like the same mirror from Amazing Mirror. And after defeating your shadow self, the mirror then summons Dark Meta Knight, like the same entity from Amazing Mirror. Ending with the king destroying that evil piece of glass, seemingly for good. I mean, I never thought that we would see it again, and lo and behold, there it is. So maybe we'll see it again in the future. At this point, I don't know. Honestly, I am just more shocked than anything else that they would even acknowledge Amazing Mirror. That game wasn't developed by HAL, so I figured they would just sweep it under the rug, but hey, what do you know? Guess not. So yeah, all in all, pretty good extra mode. Takes only about 2 hours to complete, and it's nice to actually play as a different character for a change, rather than just Kirby again. As if I'm not playing as Kirby enough in my life as it is. But now it's that time to wrap up the main adventure. After making his way through the final area, Royal Road, Kirby rescues these flower fairies, known as the People of the Sky, who open up a door leading to Taranza's hideout. It turns out that actually, Taranza kidnapped King Dedede, assuming he was the hero of the land, not Kirby. Oops. After fighting a controlled Dedede in a mask, with, of course, the awesome music included, Taranza summons his master, Queen Sectonia, who is actually just a queen bee. Huh. Okay, certainly a nice change of pace from the hellspawn of games gone by. She blasts away Taranza for disappointing her, and then it's time to fight. And I love this fight. She has many different attacks up her sleeve, combined with the teleportation ability that is basically a requirement for being a Kirby final boss. And yes, I will say it again, the music is incredible. Like, speaking candidly here, I can't understand what compelled the developers to put insanely epic music for a Kirby game's final fight, but whoever made that decision, give them a raise, it's amazing. After taking out the first form, Sectonia reveals her plan to combine with the Dream Stalk to cover up the entirety of Popstar in what she believes to be pure beauty. That's a bit of an ego on her, I'll admit. And thanks to a revived Dedede consistently shooting Kirby out of a cannon because, hey, sure, why not? Motion controls. And also a little throwback to Kirby's Adventure, I like that a lot. Kirby battles Sectonia once again in another epic clash, ending with Taranza actually providing Kirby with a miracle fruit, leading to a Hypernova section that is, oh man, it's really, really good. She throws basically everything she can at Kirby and he's just like, nah, I got this in my mouth, it's all good. But finally, in a move of desperation, the Queen thinks that she will blast Kirby away with this massive energy beam. However, just like everything else, Kirby sucks in the entire beam and even her life bar. That's true power. And with that, Queen Sectonia is defeated, freeing Popstar as well as the people of the sky. And it's all thanks to Kirby, King Dedede, and even the Dreamstalk, which was initially planted by the Sky People to bring Kirby to them in the first place. The day was saved, ending Kirby Triple Deluxe. And actually, before I wrap this up, I gotta mention this. Sectonia actually has a bit of a sad backstory. It turns out that she and Taranza were once friends. She really wanted to have eternal beauty, and Taranza provided the dimension mirror, thinking that that would help. Instead, it ends up twisting Sectonia into the evil form she turned into, and she was so far gone that she forgot who she used to be. And she used her dark magic to get Taranza to do her bidding, and that spell was seemingly broken when she blasted him away, explaining then why he would help you oppose her instead. It's so weird that they would add a depressing backstory to a final boss character that's only described in optional text in a Kirby game. But anyway, I have said all that I can and a whole lot more about this game. Triple Deluxe outshines its predecessor in every way, and it shows that the series not only had, but it still has room to grow and evolve. And we're going to see just how much more it does evolve next time on the Kirby Marathon, as we take a look at the next game on 3DS, Kirby Planet Robobot. Row, fight the power. There's going to be a couple Gurren Lagann references in there. It'll all make sense next time. Row, fight the power. This is it, everybody. The final, at the time of this video at least, the final mainline Kirby game in the series, Planet Robobot. Now, what's interesting is that this game sort of came out of nowhere. It was announced randomly at a Nintendo Direct, and then within 3 months, it was released worldwide. 3 months! There's your interesting development history, I guess. Now, initially, this was set to be a direct sequel to Triple Deluxe, with the likes of Hypernova and a bunch of other mechanics returning. But then, I'm just wagering a guess here, one of the main developers watched Gurren Lagann, an anime where people inside of gigantic robots do extraordinary things, and thought to himself, you know what Kirby's been missing all this time? A giant mech that looks like him. Oh, and yes, I totally own a Planet Robobot official display. Don't act surprised. The story this time takes us back to a peaceful day on Popstar. Spoilers, not so peaceful. Out of nowhere, a huge spaceship filled with robotic invaders connects itself to the planet, and to retaliate, King Dedede and crew, as well as Meta Knight, try to fight back as best as they could, but ultimately, they fail. Kirby, unsurprisingly, really, slept through the entire thing, and upon waking up, he immediately goes out to find out just what's going on. He is somehow both unreliable and completely reliable, all at the same time. It's weird. And that's really all the plot that you're given at the start. What's interesting though is that it isn't until World 3 where you start getting just a bit more story development. It's here where you meet Susie, the secretary of Halt Man Works Company, the group responsible for invading Popstar. Clearly having a vendetta against organic life forms, she turns Meta Knight into a robot named Mecha Knight. That's real cute, and even made evil clones of Dedede. Now there is actually quite a bit more story, but I'll get to that later. It's just odd that the game kicks off in no time flat, then the story comes at you randomly after thinking that you're just gonna beat up some robots for a few worlds and then credits. And yes, Dedede still has weird eyes. I'm sorry, I know it still doesn't matter, but it still weirds me out. And now, don't act too surprised here, the game basically plays identical to the 2 games prior. Shocking. You see, many people consider these 3 games to be a trilogy. Well, for now at least, until a 4th game potentially comes out. Not for some overarching story, of course, they never explain what happens to his eyes, but because they are all based on the same gameplay engine. Once again, run, jump, and float your way to victory. This time, the main collectibles are the code cubes, which are basically the same as the sunstones, and the extra collectibles come in the form of stickers, each with a special Kirby illustration, and 1 rare sticker in each stage. Basically the same as the keychains. I think the stickers are way worse though. I don't know, just comparing them to the keychains, it's a lot less interesting getting flat images of artwork over 3-dimensional sprites. Some of them aren't even Kirby designs, and I gotta tell ya, it really isn't that exciting getting access to the almighty number 2. Number 0 though, that's when things get crazy. As for the main gimmick though, that is where things get awesome. Say hello to the Robobot armor. This huge hunk of metal makes Kirby a force to be reckoned with, being able to now mow down everything in your path with the simple push of a button. And while the gimmicks before with the super abilities and Hypernova were additions that modified like one section of a level and you moved on, so much of this game is based around the Robobot armor that it is so much more than that. And it's thanks to being able to use abilities in combination with the armor, almost harkening back to the Animal Buddies of the Dreamland games. And sure, each ability can destroy stuff in similar ways, not really unlike the super abilities, but the Robobot, quite simply, is far more enjoyable to use, because it also has the added variety element of the Hypernova, with each ability having a handful of different uses throughout the adventure. There's a couple special uses as well, with Wheel turning the armor into a super fast and agile race car, and with the returning Jet turning the armor into a plane for shooting sections. And the music for these parts? Is so good. You can also take those stickers that you collect and actually place them on its arms. Cool. And since the Robobot gets so much use, there's a lot less of playing as Kirby proper than I initially thought that there would be. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter that much since it is fun all the same, and it also solves that dreaded issue of feeling like the game is just more of the same. But also, it is pretty obvious that this is where the Gurren Lagann influence comes into play. I mean, someone inside of a face-shaped robot causing havoc and saving the day. And sure, you could also argue that this is similar to the ride armor from Mega Man X as well, but come on, if the developers didn't watch this anime, I would be astounded. It's actually a pretty good one too, just throwing that out there. But no worries, you still play as Kirby without the armor a ton, and of course, the abilities are where Kirby shines. Classics like Needle and Wing got cut, as well as the newer ones like Spear, Bell, and Beetle. Circus is still there though, much to my dismay. As for the new ones, well, conjure up deadly medicine and take out foes with pills, and even a clipboard with Doctor. But more importantly, look at this. Oh my goodness, this is amazing. Harness a ton of psychic energy as if you're from Onett with ESP, and leave damaging goo in every possible direction, or take a joyride on it, why not, with poison. Once again, a good lineup of new abilities. Kinda like Circus, Doctor is a bit odd to use since his moveset is quite varied, but I am way more willing to forgive this one because again, look at this! As for some returning abilities, you see, I didn't really make that big of a deal about the likes of Wing or Ninja returning because, hey, they're cool and they fit in with the rest. However, not only did Jet return, but so does Mirror. And Mirror is like one of the best abilities ever, so I am more than happy to see this one show up again. But on top of that, Smash makes a return as well, and even UFO. However, these are mainly just bonus abilities that rarely have any opportunity to be used, UFO being relegated as a 100% completion reward. However, thanks to Amiibo! Think I got that. You can actually access these on the fly. Most amiibo correlate to a power that fits the character used, which is cute, I guess, and using the Kirby line of amiibo result in either UFO, which is nice, or pre-existing abilities just with an alternate look. So yeah, the amiibo functionality in this game is pretty useless. Didn't stop me from buying all of them, of course, including the Japanese exclusive diorama. As I mentioned before, Planet Robobot is more of the same in the sense of Kirby playing like Triple Deluxe, but thanks to the Robobot armor, the game feels a lot more fresh than rehashed. Level designs and unique ideas are probably some of the best the series has ever seen, and thematically is where the game really shines. The entire game, from its worlds, enemies, and bosses, have a new mechanical theme to it. And it acts as a great opposite of Triple Deluxe, since that adventure had a much more natural feel to it. This means there's new stuff as simple as returning enemies having a bit of metal on them, to the new wispy woods being completely made out of metal, named Clanky Woods. Again, keeping the wood spirit alive, I like that. And most importantly, completely new level themes. You explore the insides of moving trains, bustling cities with Waddle Dees driving cars, and keeping mind of the stoplight. Oh my god, that is adorable! A giant ice cream factory, a desert with power lines being held up by forks. It's so good! Each world about halfway through also has a laboratory stage, which is neat, basically giving you the chance to take down the Haltman Works enemies at each of their bases. The soundtrack fits the mechanical theme too, with many of the songs sounding like super high quality chiptunes, fitting the game beautifully. A ton of the tracks are actually remixes too, and it is really cool hearing these songs in a new way. And while the previous games had a bit of fan service here and there, this time they dialed that up tenfold. Naturally, Factory Inspection, one of the best songs from Kirby 64, got a remix, as did Dark Castle from Dreamland 2, randomly, which is amazing. World 2's boss is basically Pix from 64, who summons holograms of older bosses, including the Ice Dragon from Dreamland 2, because hey, why not? And boy, you can only imagine my surprise getting here and seeing Kaboola show up out of nowhere with the remix of Dreamland 1's boss theme. As a longtime Kirby fan, this stuff just gives me pure unbridled joy, and it made what was already a great game pretty excellent. And of course, there is more to do outside of the main adventure once again, with 2 brand new subgames. First up is Team Kirby Clash, essentially an action RPG where 4 Kirbys of varying classes, aka modified abilities, battle against powerful bosses, resulting in gaining experience points and leveling up. It's actually pretty odd in concept, but it's fun all the same, and actually, a Kirby RPG doesn't sound like the worst idea. Hal, come on, get on that. And in Kirby 3D Rumble, you control the pink puffball in a 3D space with the goal of defeating all of the enemies as fast as possible and with as many defeated in a row as possible. And this one is pretty fun as well, and it looks a whole lot like that one cancelled game from Return's development, which is pretty neat. And also, the bosses in this mode are Mashers, who showed up in Dreamland 2, and that's it. All of this out of nowhere Dreamland 2 appreciation, I love it. Unfortunately though, this mode is really short, only 3 levels. The arena is back as well, of course, as is the true arena with harder forms of the existing bosses. You're used to that at this point, except now, it is absolutely brutal. I gotta just say that, it's probably like the hardest true arena the series has seen yet. And as for the extra adventure, welcome back the returning Meta Nightmare. It's been a while since we could play as Meta Knight, but man, it is so good to be back. Like DDD Tour before it, this is a truncated form of the main adventure with the always sword-wielding Meta Knight instead, who is so powerful, he don't need no stinking Robobot armor. He can destroy damn near anything just with his blade. His special moves from Superstar return as well. By collecting these blue orbs, you can activate simple power-ups like speed up or health recovery, or deal a massive blow to your enemies with the help of some of your allies. And as for fan service, oh boy! After defeating a major boss near the end of the game, This machine randomly summons a clone of Dark Matter from Dreamland 2, with the accompanying music as well. Oh, okay, that's awesome. And then there's a clone of Queen Sectonia, who upon defeat, briefly transforms into a being resembling Tyranza, furthering that sad backstory of her once being friends with him. And naturally, things end off with Galactonite, because of course it does. Meta Knight versus Galactonite is like one of the coolest battles the series has ever come up with, so of course it was going to happen again. And it's not even like the fight is radically different than the two battles before, but it's still really cool. The fight ends with Galactonite being sealed once again. Not that it matters, because you know this is going to happen again, and I cannot wait for it to happen again. Oh man, I can't handle this, it's too much. It is far too much fan service in such a short amount of time. Now, I'm sure an argument can be made over pure enjoyment value over obvious pandering to longtime fans. Dark Matter shows up, that is obvious pandering to longtime fans. Well, you know what, I don't care about that argument. The end of Meta Nightmare is awesome regardless. But okay, I think I've been fanboying for long enough. Let's wrap up the main adventure. After dealing with Susie's evil forces, as well as Susie herself, Kirby finds his way to the central hub of Haltman Works Company, Access Arc, and after another fight with Mecha Knight, which actually ends by seeing Meta Knight's eyes for the first time in 3D, pretty neat I think, President Haltman finally reveals himself. And apparently his full name is actually Max Prophet Haltman. That's amazing. He dismisses Susie for disappointing him, and then reveals his plan. Turns out that Haltman has been studying advanced technologies of the world to reactivate a wish-granting computer, Stardream, and he will not let Kirby stop him. And donning a mech of his very own, they battle. And of course, he loses. I mean, come on, you can't beat the pink puffball, no matter how hard you try. Haltman then tries to control Stardream himself with a special helmet. However, Susie comes out of nowhere, taking the helmet off of him, revealing her plan of selling Stardream for a high profit. Okay. That kinda came out of nowhere. However, something weird happens. Stardream manages to possess Haltman, and it reveals, because everyone's revealing something right now, that through all of the studying, it finds that all organic life forms are a nuisance, and now intends on wiping all of them in the universe. Which, damn, okay, that's quite a jump from I want to cover Popstar in a plant. Realizing the error in her ways, she calls upon a Robobot armor and asks Kirby to stop Stardream. Not really sure how we're gonna stop it, I mean Stardream flew off into space. Oh, okay, I see what we're doing, Meta Knight with the halberd, I get it. This leads to a fight in space between Stardream and Robobot Halberd. And yeah, it's pretty sweet. It's very different than a typical Kirby final boss, this being a behind-the-back shooter. But hey, with basically half the game being about the Robobot armor anyway, I would expect nothing less. And of course the music is amazing, like I can't even joke about that anymore. Excellent final boss music is just a given in the series at this point. Once defeated, Stardream combines with the Access Arc, which I swear is just more Gurren Lagann stuff, and we are on to the next phase. It's a pretty similar fight, a lot of stuff being thrown at you as you hold the shoot button the entire time. But throughout the fight, you knock parts of the shell away to reveal that Access Arc is actually Nova from Superstar? I mean, you wouldn't really think it, but Kirby actually has some deep lore. That's okay. After one more final shoot fest, not Nova manages to get one last blow in on the halberd, shooting it down. Thankfully though, Meta Knight quickly jumps on top of the ship to shoot the Robobot armor out as Kirby forms a drill out of its hand, which is just more Gurren Lagann, and proceeds to drill through its last defenses as he drills its head in, destroying it for good. And let me tell you, this segment only lasts about 20 seconds, but it is a damn epic 20 seconds. That is, unless you're in the true arena, where suddenly, Stardream manages to inhale Kirby, leading to a battle with the machine's core. Phase 1 basically being a recreation of Nova's heart from Superstar. Like I said, True Arena is a pain in the butt. Throwing in a surprise final boss doesn't help things. It even does a final shockwave attack after you defeat it. And boy, if you're low on health and that takes you down, you're gonna be really mad. After the main battle, the Robobot armor somehow removes Kirby from itself and sends him back to Popstar, but not before shedding a tear at losing its master. Okay, don't know how that's a thing. Popstar has been freed of its mechanization, Meta Knight and Dedede are safe once again, Susie flies off back into space, and Kirby happily chases after the Halberd, ending Kirby Planet Robobot. But one last thing, if you thought that Sectonia had a messed up backstory, well, it turns out that President Haltman had a daughter named Susanna. They worked together to reactivate Stardream. However, an undisclosed accident caused Susanna to vanish into another dimension, and at that point, Haltman just figured that she was dead. And by constantly using the Stardream helmet, it slowly messed with his memories. So when Susie showed up, he recognized her, but he didn't realize that she was his daughter. Not only does that add a little bit of impact to Susie wanting to get rid of Stardream, but Haltman also wanted to use Stardream to bring Susanna back to life with its wish-granting capabilities. However, all of his work provided no results because in fact, she was never dead. Oh, you know, Kirby! For kids. Man, I can't believe this nerd talked about a single Kirby game for over 20 minutes. Once again, don't act surprised. But yeah, there was a lot to talk about with this one, more so than you probably initially thought. Now, all of my nostalgia will forever have me say that Adventure is my favorite in the series. There are just far too many memories here. However, when it comes to the best game in the series, Planet Robobot has that down easily. And initially, I thought otherwise, with the Robobot having so much screen time over Kirby proper. But man, it really doesn't matter, it is still a ton of fun, and combined with the overwhelming fan service, ultimately this is a Kirby dream game through and through. Animal Crossing, the most peaceful series Nintendo has, loved by the most insane, rabid fanbase the world has ever seen, roaming around the landscape, doing seemingly nothing and a whole lot at the same time, wasting hours upon hours grinding away to pay towards your home loans, all while you forget that, hey, oh yeah, there's a real world happening outside. Okay, just 5 more minutes. Like many others, New Leaf took up a ton of my time years ago, and the time in between that and New Horizons being 7 or so years, it feels like it's been forever, but during that time, Nintendo did some unspeakable things. Haha, Amiibo Festival is bad. Hot take, right? During the long stretch of time between mainline Animal Crossing games, Nintendo actually did release a variety of content for the fans. Amiibo Festival may have been one of the worst things ever, but it did also give us a line of Amiibo, so that's nice and whatnot. I have a figure of Rossetti standing up. It's very weird to see him have feet. Pocket Camp also dropped on mobile, and from what I heard, it's pretty decent for mobile game standards, so cool, but not really my thing. New Leaf got that huge Welcome Amiibo update which introduced a bunch of new content into the main game, like including Medley, the cutest Zelda character, as a possible villager. That's amazing. Oh man, Puzzle League 2? Oh my god, yes, it's like the best puzzle game ever. Oh yeah, and how can we forget about Animal Crossing Plaza? Quite easily, actually. And lastly, the game that just sorta came and went with barely anybody bringing it up in conversation, Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer. I guess I understand why. It was 2015, that was a pretty sour year for Nintendo game releases as a whole, and the angry mob was too busy forming for Amiibo Festival, so this random 3DS title didn't stand a chance. When you really think about it, Animal Crossing spin-offs make a lot of sense. These games are all about relaxing, collecting, absorbing the atmosphere, but maybe there's a way to get that world across without some of the monotony that those main games feature so prominently. And clearly a board game wasn't going to get the job done. Maybe just designing homes will? Man, who's to say? But the box art is really cute, so that's all I need to see. The concept behind this game actually makes a ton of sense. The Happy Room Academy was already a thing in previous Animal Crossing games, an association that would inspect and grade your home based on what you filled it with. And New Leaf already gave us the idea of being the mayor of an entire town, so it didn't sound too unreasonable to now make you responsible for designing other villagers' rooms rather than your own. But instead of the Happy Room Academy, it is now the Happy Home Academy, and it's part of Nook's Homes. Keep up. Oh my god, you can finally customize your character now instead of just answering a bunch of dumb questions and hoping for the best. This is already fantastic. Welcome to Nook's Homes, where a ragtag group of animals get together and decide how everybody is going to be living their lives going forward. And you are the newest employee. While you thought you already knew how arranging a home was going to play out, the tutorial tells you otherwise. With this game, there is full touchscreen support, allowing you to pull items from a catalog and drag and drop them to your heart's content. It is so damn fluid. You can even rearrange the villagers if you want. You are a god in this world. Do whatever you please. You go to sleep now. You don't have a choice. You can even take items and place them in between tiles now. I know it doesn't sound like the biggest deal. It actually sounds quite minute, but it works out because now you're able to squeeze between things. And it really goes to show you that Animal Crossing fans are impressed by the most basic of things. I love this. I can only imagine what this would have been like if you didn't have the touch controls. That sounds like a nightmare. Oh man, and you actually interact with items now too. I know this is also really minor, but going to a book rack and actually being able to pull a book off and flip through it, that's pretty cool. It adds a lot of purpose to these minor things you fill the homes with. But what is the game itself all about, you may be asking? Well, as an esteemed employee of Nook's Homes, it is up to you to explore the area and find new clientele, listen to their hopes and desires, and design the home of their dreams. It's that simple. Eventually, you even get the ability to design their yards too, which at the same time also allows you to decide the landscape and even the season their home is permanently going to be located. You get provided a theme to work with, as well as a new slew of matching items, and from there, you kinda just do whatever you want. No rules, no losing conditions, just mess around with the furniture a bit, and the client is gonna love whatever you throw their way. The thing is though, with this game, you can't necessarily win. You just keep building houses until you get bored of it. And yeah, it does sound a whole lot more boring when you talk about it out loud. After a certain point, every single job you do feels exactly the same. You go through the same motions with each one. It's just a matter of the slight variables that the characters request of you. But honestly, as long as the items they want are there, the format could be whatever you want. Especially if you use an amiibo to call up some of the more prominent characters like Tom Nook. With them, there are literally no rules. Like nothing whatsoever. You can do whatever you want as long as they have a place to be, they're fine with it. It's definitely more interesting working with the characters who have some idea of how they want to live their life. Like O'Hare wanted an island paradise. Fair enough, I put his house by the beach and gave him some palm trees, and inside I gave him an island to relax on and a lovely glass of vacation juice. I really like this one. I forced myself to work with a limited space, and I'm really happy with the results. On the other hand, Simon here wanted a banana bungalow, so I threw 2 bananas in an empty room and called it a day. That's it. Both of these were considered a success. Well, boy, do I sure feel like a winner. You know what? I'm actually pretty satisfied with some of these layouts of mine. I really like how some of these turned out. I guess it's time to take a look at the Happy Home Network and see what other people have come up with. Oh, wow. All right, now you're just showing off. Okay, so like, I thought my stuff was good. I genuinely did, but clearly I'm trash. There is a finish line, however. Despite everything you may think, there is an end goal to work towards. As your client base grows, you'll have the opportunity to work on full-on facilities as well. Like here, we have a multi-room hotel. Starting things off is a nice waiting area here, leading into 2 different rooms. One of them I made nice and fancy. This is clearly where the platinum members are gonna stay. The other Not that. And of course, there's a food area as well, probably to serve some continental breakfast or something, with a bunch of froggy chairs to sit on. Wouldn't have it any other way. And then we have the department store. One room I have featuring a handful of top-of-the-line products only for the wealthiest of buyers, and in the other, froggy chairs. All of them. And what's also kind of cool is after all this is said and done, you can visit your creations and see a handful of villagers in the environment that you played a part in making. Having all these rooms that you spent all this time making and seeing them being put to full use, it's a pretty satisfying feeling. Once you wrap up all the facilities, the town is considered complete. Looking back at where things started off and seeing where they are now, we've come a long way. There's a celebration ceremony, the credits roll, and then you go back into the game and you keep building for villagers until you die. Alright, maybe not that severe. But the main question people seem to ask is this game fun? I think the main discrepancy here is calling this a game in the first place. Sure, it's not like you can even necessarily complete an Animal Crossing game, but more so than the main titles, this primarily feels like a toolbox or a toy rather than a full game. Is it fun trying to stick to the arbitrary rules set out in front of you just to make a random villager happy? I mean, yeah, I think so. It does get super repetitive the more you play it, but I don't think this was meant to be played in long sessions anyway. It's also nice to know that after a few years, I'll be able to pull this game off the shelf, easily remember how to play, and then just do a couple villagers before I put it back on the shelf. I can work with that. Besides, at this point, you can probably find the game for dirt cheap, so I doubt you have much to lose here. And if anything, the best part is the influence this game has on the main series. New Leaf's Welcome Amiibo update featured room editing elements that Happy Home Designer initially implemented, and that's really nice. It also shows that the ability to place furniture in between tiles is a really cool thing, because you still can't do that in New Leaf, and it really sucks. And by the looks of things, New Horizons has some Happy Home Designer elements as well. And that's just nice. So at the end of the day, was it really worth getting a pretty inoffensive spin-off so we're not restricted to pushing and pulling items in a cramped space ever again? You're damn right. The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. Hard to believe this game is over 10 years old now. Sorry for making you feel old in the process, by the way. But damn it, this game has not aged a single day. Minish Cap may feel like a spiritual successor to A Link to the Past, but I can't believe that Nintendo made a full-on actual sequel to A Link to the Past as a part of their process to revitalize 3DS sales in 2013. And they released it the same day as Super Mario 3D World. Like, oh my god, the Xbox One released the same day. That's what did that console in, man, not the other shenanigans. It's that deadly Zelda Mario combo pack, holy. And immediately, we are back to a traditional button layout now. Plus, we have smooth analog movement for Link, which, god, it feels so good. The speed and reaction time that you have between pressing the B button and the sword slashing is so damn quick, like, dude, this game feels great. But yes, this is in fact a sequel to A Link to the Past. I mean, for crying out loud, in Japan the game has a big old 2 on it. Hyrule is virtually the same layout as it was back on the Super Nintendo, and while it's not the Dark World this time around, Lorule plays a very similar role, as a slightly modified and visually darker variation with an incredible theme song to accompany it. Or rather than just being the same game all over again, we got a handful of gimmicks and changes to the Zelda format that make this adventure fresh. For one, we got wall mechanics now, thanks to the new villain, Yuga, who happens to be able to turn people 2D. What a power! They took Super Paper Mario and made it a guy. Love to see it. You see, this new bad boy has not only trapped Zelda into a painting, but all of the sages as well. And for any normal plebeian, that means you're trapped forever. But for Link and his brand new magical bracelet, we can just pop in and out whenever we want. This means that we now have a whole new world of walls to latch ourselves onto for traversal, and this is awesome. Sorry, this time Link becomes a wall. Sounds like the dumbest idea ever conceived, but wow, leave it to top tier game developers to make this an incredible mechanic. Attaching yourself to moving walls to travel over gaps, being able to easily wrap to the opposing side of a building, simply dodging certain enemies in boss attacks. Like there's this one boss that is a wall for a shield, you attach yourself onto it, and then he pulls it behind him like, oh, where did he go? And then you slash him from the back. God, it's so cool. This is such a simple idea that is really used to its maximum maximum potential here, and it spices up a world that you thought you knew from the 16-bit days. But arguably even cooler, once you pick up the Master Sword after a few dungeons, you then have the freedom to tackle the remaining 7 dungeons in any order that you want. Rather than relying on the old style of getting an item from a dungeon and using that to get to the next one, you now have the option to rent nearly every single item super early on thanks to the newcomer, Ravio. And yes, rent is the proper word, because if you die, you lose your items and have to rent them again, or spend even more to permanently own them. But quite frankly, after you get enough hearts, dying is rarely an issue, at least for me, so never really was a big deal. But if you're bad at Zelda, you're probably gonna die and rent these items a lot. Sorry about that. Not only does this turn the rest of Hyrule and the entirety of Lorule into an open world, there's also the hidden Maiamai quest. This Maiamai mother lost 100 of her babies. Quite the irresponsible parent, but that's neither here nor there. And these children are everywhere, and it is so rewarding just seeing one on a wall, hearing one nearby, and finding them under a rock. You get one like every 10 paces if you're paying attention. What's also cool is that you also don't have all of Lorule accessible at once. It's chopped up into different segments, where it's required to find the portals in Hyrule to travel through, which then leads to more exploration, meaning your chances of finding more Maiamai are greater, and remembering where these bombable walls are or something else along your journey, it's easier than ever before. And God, the moment-to-moment gameplay here is damn near perfection. It's worth mentioning here too that Lorule has its own Princess Zelda, taking the form of Princess Hilda. I like her, she's kinda cute. Like, let's be honest here, the story in this game is pretty simplistic. I would argue more simple than like every other portable Zelda game thus far. The main focus of this adventure is just getting on with it and letting you free into the world. Though, that being said, the production values whenever the cutscenes do play out are honestly pretty impressive. Like, this game looks really friggin' good, okay? Zelda is taken, Ravio gives you items, Hilda gives you some advice. Go, who cares, stop reading text, just go. Ganon does finally play a prevalent role in a portable game here, but Yuga is still a pretty strong antagonist. Because, hell, even with Ganon back, he soon merges with Yuga to become a brand new thing. It's kinda just a means to have a visually similar final boss fight with a Ganon-like character, but now with wall attacks. And that's fine, because hey, the entirety of these portable Zelda games did something different with the final bosses still, even though Ganon is technically here. Every Zelda game in this video had a different antagonist, and that's amazing. And plus, we got this brand new sweet artwork replicating the classic Super Nintendo style, so any complaints I have about throwing Ganon back into things should really be thrown out the window, because this artwork is so beautiful. I love this so much. It's a shame Link doesn't have pink hair in this one, but you know what? I'll still take it. The pacing, man, the pacing of this game is ridiculous. You are always moving. You are always finding new things. Always slamming face first into every wall you possibly can just for the hell of it, you never know. And you're maybe thinking to yourself, well, what if I don't care about the Maiamai? And first off, what are you, heartless? Look at them. Second off, when you buy items from Ravio, you are then able to upgrade them by returning batches of 10 baby Maiamai to their mother, making them a lot stronger and more useful. This is great. Honestly, I don't even care about the whole renting versus buying thing. It's just a mean to turn the game from a typical linear affair to an open world playground, but the item upgrading really elevates things to the next level, and man, I love it so much. And since the main focus here is just getting to the next dungeon, it does help that said dungeons are incredible. Since now you can only enter the dungeon after having a specific item instead of getting the item partway through it, that means that we have dungeon designs with cool item-based puzzles as soon as you walk in. Clearly, this game doubled as a test for Breath of the Wild when it came to taking the typical Zelda conventions and changing them up and building a new adventure around those new ideas. And while I think ultimately I may still prefer Link to the Past because I do prefer the typical Zelda conventions, it is hard to deny that A Link Between Worlds is not only one of the best 3DS games, but one of the greatest handheld games Nintendo has ever produced. Also, there's baseball. Best Zelda game. You ever see that image of how Nintendo managed to nail the top-down look for this game and it's just Link doing the... That's beautiful. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. This was actually known as Luigi's Mansion 2 early in development, and it even maintained that name outside of North America. And I gotta say, thank goodness, us Americans are terrified of numbers. Except for the number 3. that one's okay, apparently. Luigi's Mansion getting a sequel out of nowhere was certainly a surprise. The original would go on to sell well, review well, and elements of it made cameos in other games. Like Luigi finally had some defining character traits. That's more than we can say for Mario. His water gun in Sunshine that was conveniently also built by EGAD had a stronger personality than he did. But Nintendo was going in hard with the big titles for their brand new 3DS handheld. So at E3 2011, with one of the coolest things Nintendo's ever done with a dozen oddly shaped monitors, a new Luigi's Mansion was born. And this time, development was handed over to Next Level Games, the company responsible for the Punch-Out reboot, Super Mario Strikers, one of the best Mario sports games ever made, and how can we possibly forget about Ticket to Ride on the Xbox 360? That was a classic. I've only played through this game once before, back in 2013 when it was brand new. Clearly, I haven't been compelled to play it again since then, even though I've played the original game on both GameCube and 3DS at least a dozen times. I adore that game to bits, but for whatever reason, clearly, once was enough for me, so after all these years later, I am very excited to take another trip to Luigi's Mansion 2. I mean Dark Moon. The adventure this time takes place in Evershade Valley. We drop in on Professor EGAD doing some more research with his crew of friendly green ghosts, and everything seems just dandy. But then we see a King Boo-shaped silhouette in the sky break the Dark Moon into pieces, scattering them across the valley, and turning the once friendly ghosts aggressive. And, well, since Luigi handled the ghosts last time, he gets called upon to tackle some ghosts once again, getting ripped right from his home via his television. That's pretty good technology. And see, that's what you get for wasting energy leaving the TV on like that. That's foolish. Well, our goal's pretty clear. Find the pieces of the Dark Moon and take care of any spectral baddies that float in your way. Oh, and Mario got kidnapped once again too. Of course he did. You're losing your edge there, Mr. Jumpman. Also, can I say, some of the animations here just feel unfinished? Sometimes a character does a thing, and then they just stop moving. And now we go on to the portion of today's show where I try to do the cliche YouTuber thing and reenact the weird part of a video game that I just talked about. Hope it makes you laugh. The big change this time around is rather than having one mansion to explore every nook and cranny of, now we have 5 different mansions, each one with their own unique themes and gimmicks, and regular instances of being pulled out by EGAD since the adventure is now mission-based. I think this was done to push the portable gaming idea of playing a game in short sessions instead of long ones, but it doesn't make sense for this type of game in my opinion. When you're thrown into a mansion, you still have access to a good chunk of it, and there are benefits to exploration, such as hidden gems and bonus rooms, but being locked out of progression until you deal with some dialogue boxes and menus just doesn't feel natural, since you'll often jump right back into where you left off anyway, and it's not like the game isn't afraid to tell you to do some backtracking. It's no knock on the actual content of the game itself, but I'm not a fan of how this adventure is structured. Oh, and EGAD also calls you like every 5 minutes. It's terrible. Listen, alright, I get it. It's a very, very catchy ringtone. We're using the dual scream now instead of the Game Boy Horror, which is a hardware leap that I can approve of, but it's pretty annoying. Once we jump into that first mission though, oh, it does feel good to be doing this again. Walking around these dark and unknown environments, grabbing our trusted and upgraded ghost vacuum, the Poltergust 5000, and doing some good old-fashioned ghost busting, it feels really good. We're still not ripping off Ghostbusters, we swear. While each mission does technically have an original objective, everything you do boils down to going to a point specified on the map and sucking up anything that you run across. Especially when a lot of the missions boil down to go into this door. Oh wait, now you can't because they took the thing, go and find the thing. That happens a lot, and it does feel like padding at times, but at least the act of going and getting the thing is pretty consistent. There are a lot more puzzles this time too, usually of the environmental variety, which is really nice, but otherwise, it's a pretty simple setup. To help you out along your adventure, some changes have been made to the whole ghost capturing process. Aiming can now be done with the face buttons. You press X to look up and B to look down, which feels really nice. And to deal with crowds of ghosts, you now have access to the strobe bulb, a chargeable flash of light that does a much better job than just turning a flashlight off and then on real quick. And once you have a ghost, pulling them back now fills up this special meter that when filled up, you can do an extra powerful pull to take a bigger chunk out of their health. I really like this. The whole struggle that you have with the ghosts is half of the fun of the entire game, so having that extra incentive to not only suck them in, but to do it well, is pretty satisfying. The new dark light mechanic opens up some puzzle opportunities as well. It's pretty obvious when you need to use it, but the sound design behind it makes it a fairly gratifying item to use. Admittedly, I do still miss the elemental spirits from the first game. They were pretty nice. Regarding the types of ghosts that you tackle, they're handled pretty differently. Just from a design perspective, I'm not really a fan. They just come off as a whole lot more comedic, and I think the more sinister approach of the ghosts from the first game made them a more immediate threat. I mean, the common green ones just kinda giggle most of the time, and it really just takes me out of the whole idea of, oh no, spooky ghosts. There was also this one that was in the middle of using the toilet before Luigi comes in and ruins its day. I mean, yeah, I would be pretty mad too. But when it comes time to actually battle them, this was handled really well. Yeah, they are still pretty simple, and on the surface, you mainly only have 4 different types to go against, but the basic green ones will sometimes bring in weapons or have an extra bit of protection before being able to hit them with your light. And when you're thrown into a room filled with ghosts, which happens a lot, it's as fun as ever to take them all down as best as you can. There's also no equivalent to the portrait ghosts. That's a major blow. The standard ones don't really have all that much personality, and when they do get a chance to show it off, it's just, haha, we're just a bunch of goofs. But that would have been fine if there were more intimidating ones to go for that had some character, and there's just nothing here. There is this one special battle against this trio, the 3 sisters, but it's the only fight of its kind. They don't even have that much of a personality, it's just a mini-boss that pops up in a cemetery. But why isn't there more of this stuff? But what about the main bosses? Every single mansion has one final challenge before you move on to the next one, and they're not that great either. The first boss against the spider is really cool since it's one long puzzle using fire, but the others, you wait for the right moment and suck away. Where did the innovation go? One of the bosses is legit just an enemy gauntlet. There's a sort of callback to the Boolossus fight, which is kinda neat, but that's about it. And the chili ride fight. This is absolutely the worst. How did they let this happen? You gotta like aim these cannonballs to hit every part of this ice face, but there's always gonna be one panel that's near impossible to hit, and then oh look at that, all the panels came back. Oh hey, look at that. I hate it. It's not even like the ghosts behind these battles are interesting. They all end up just being the same weird looking spooky boys with like, oh, this one has 2 horns on it. Cool. But you catch them the same way every time. It is ultimately a matter of preference on how big of a deal the lack of a portrait ghost equivalent leaves on the game as a whole. But when the standard enemies are less of a threat and there's no bigger threat in sight, it just reduces the tension to an incredibly low level. And we already know King Boo is at the end of the game. He's literally one of the first things we see. Yeah, the dark lighting ain't fooling me on this one. He shows up in the background of a few scenes later on, which is kinda cool, but the surprise was gone a long time ago. It sometimes feels like I'm just completing this game for the sake of it, rather than trying to overcome any challenges that are thrown my way. That being said though, Dark Moon does do some really cool things, and some things I would say are better than the original. If Luigi's Mansion helped launch Luigi's personality, Dark Moon goes above and beyond to make sure that this green Mario brother is an absolute lovable goofball. I'm not the only one going along for the ride for the sake of it. Luigi clearly is too. There are cutscenes abound with a ton of minor voice acting, and like in every single one, he's presented as this big dumb idiot who has no idea what he's doing. And it's incredible. Honestly, this is where a good chunk of the fun in this adventure was had, just getting to see what Luigi was gonna do next. And they included a dog, Polterpup. This game is absolutely in my good graces now. Add an adorable dog into anything, and it immediately goes up like a good 3 points. And on top of that, the boos return. But instead of just being a thing to collect, there's only one per mission, and they're pretty well hidden. Capturing them ends up feeling like more of a reward, especially since now you pull them by the tongue and then they bounce all across the room. I love it every single time. Getting all of them for a single mansion also unlocks an extra time-based challenge to tackle. It's not much, but hey, at least it's something. And then we have the returning Toads, this time acting like more of an escort mission instead of just being crybabies like the first game. And I really liked these too. Sometimes you get to inhale the Toad and then shoot it across a gap, which is a game mechanic like that I can't believe I said out loud. Sometimes they are absolute idiots, but they do more good than not. And even if this game loses a lot of the charm and atmosphere, I really like the idea of going through multiple themed mansions. There's a buried clock tower, a mining area on top of a snowy mountain, a haunted botanical garden. It's really cool. And the theming really does lend itself to some cool puzzles when you're not too occupied busting some ghosts. The music is alright, nowhere near as iconic as the first game's theme, but it gets the job done in my opinion. You also can't scream Mario's name at the push of a button. Yo-ho. This game is inching back closer to a 0 out of 10. And then, well, we all saw this coming. After we retrieve all of the pieces of the Dark Moon, we get intercepted on our trip back to Egad's lab and land in King Boo's illusion, where, making his grand reveal, King Boo. Now, seeking revenge for the events of the first game, this king takes advantage of the now frenzied ghosts to become ruler of the world. But listen, buddy, we have a vacuum, alright? Nothing can possibly stop me. It's a pretty alright final battle. You gotta use his fear of light to leave him under the spiked balls that he himself shoots up into the air, and then you do a chase segment in a little side-scrolling area, something awfully reminiscent of Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness, and then you do that a few times, you try to suck him in with the poltergust every now and then when you have the chance, and in no time, he's back to being captured where he belongs. As I said, not much of a last battle. I think he did a better job in the first game, but oh man, does the ending ever make up for it. Luigi manages to pull Mario out of the portrait that he's trapped in thanks to his dark light, and once the Dark Moon has been restored to its original form, all of the ghosts become good again, and they regain their pupils. That was the true sign of not being evil all along. Just getting to see Mario and Luigi being so happy, like they're finally celebrating all of the work that Luigi put into getting into this ending. It's so heartwarming.
Thanks, my bro. Thanks, Mario.
Oh, that was just the most precious thing I've ever seen. And the last thing we see is Polterpup going to sleep in Luigi's lap. This is one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Nothing negative I've said about this game matters anymore. Well, before we wrap things up, I guess there is the multiplayer mode to talk about as well, the Scare Scraper, where up to 4 players take in the role of Green Luigi, Orange Luigi, Blue Luigi, and Pink Luigi work together to traverse a series of rooms in a variety of timed-based modes, like capturing every ghost, trying to find the floor's exit, and catching a bunch of Polterpups. It's a pretty enjoyable time. You know, I wouldn't say Luigi's Mansion is the type of game that needed multiplayer, especially since they had to just pull up a bunch of skins for Luigi and call it a day, but it's still fun enough if you ever get the chance to experience it. It can also be played online, so back when this game was new, it definitely added some replay value. Luigi's Mansion 2: Dark Moon is a really fun sequel, even though it's not the most faithful one. What it does do, it does pretty well, even though it goes against what the original game did so well all those years prior. The mission approach isn't ideal, and a lot of the charm is gone, but it's still a lot of fun. And honestly, the game is worth playing just to watch Luigi do things. I would pay $30 for that alone. And actually, the game was good enough to have an arcade version. I found a machine at a local Dave & Buster's, and I had a really good time with this. It's basically a 2-player on-rails game where you hold your very own poltergust to bust some ghosts on your own, and the theming of the game is obviously based on Dark Moon. Seeing a lot of this game in high definition in angles that you don't get to see in the main game itself, it's pretty cool. If you ever stumble across one of these arcade cabinets, I highly recommend giving it a shot. It's not every day you find a Luigi-themed arcade game nowadays. Let's travel back to 2013. In one of Nintendo's best marketing ideas ever, they decided to dedicate an entire year to the one, the only,
oh yeah,
Luigi. Kicking things off in an early Nintendo Direct, it was revealed that a major spotlight would be put on Mario's often neglected brother. We got Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, New Super Luigi U. He was one of the first things we saw when Mario Golf World Tour got revealed. They announced he was coming to the new Smash Brothers. You know, as if that wasn't gonna happen. Hell yeah, dude, that's so hype. And of course, Dr. Luigi. How could anybody forget about Dr. Luigi? Yeah, me. I totally forgot about Dr. Luigi. And yes, arguably the biggest announcement of all, he was going to be the main attraction of Alpha Dream's next title, Mario and Luigi Dream Team. This is awesome, all the pieces are in place for something really special here. Bowser's Inside Story was a massive success, the best game in the series yet, and at the time, Nintendo was also trying to really redeem themselves after the initial 3DS failings when it first launched. So we get to travel into Luigi's dreams as a follow-up to the previous fantastic adventure, and we get some extra bells and whistles since we're now on newer hardware. Man, I am super excited. Making the jump to new hardware with an existing franchise is always inherently exciting. Partners in Time may not have been the greatest RPG in the world, but it was still an interesting showcase of the DS's new capabilities. But now on this next console jump, we get to explore Luigi's dreams. It may not be as outlandish as traveling through Bowser's disgusting insides, but I'm still excited all the same. Oh yeah, this is a pretty cool title screen. The music is so bright and peppy, we can mess with Luigi on the touchscreen as he makes these little moaning noises. Finally, my dreams come true. We don't get the brothers yelling Nintendo like the previous games, but that's really not that big of a deal, I guess. One thing though, in Europe, the game is called Dream Team Bros, which I always found kinda odd. I'm pretty sure everybody already knew that Mario and Luigi were brothers, right? Oh man, Bowser's Inside Story, such a fantastic game. That Mario and Luigi, man, they make such perfect cousins. That family dynamic, that's family goals right there. I can't wait to play the sequel. They're what? On top of that, they also removed Luigi's snot bubble from the Japanese box art. This one I'm okay with though, because that is gross. First and foremost, we gotta mention the new art style. When we jumped over from the GBA to the DS, things stayed pretty consistent, just more detailed. Here though, on the 3DS, we get a total shift in art style, and I don't know, it's okay, I guess. I raved over the sprite work in the last game. The way the series was handling its colorful landscapes and the solid borders on all the characters was excellent. By comparison, I do think the previous games looked a lot better, and the characters don't feel as expressive this time around. But Dream Team still looks nice, just not as nice, in my eyes. I guess we didn't get the signature outlines to make the characters pop a lot more since, hey, we have 3D now, that actually works. They probably don't even need an outline anymore. It also helps that the worlds themselves are proper 3D as well. If we look at the remakes on 3DS, we get to see the same sprite work that started here, but all the locations were flat images with lighting effects thrown on top of them. Not here though, 3D all the way. Again, it's all subjective here, I do think they all look good, I just think the other games in the series do some things better. The soundtrack is a jam though, dude, the upgraded audio quality does wonders for the music. Most of my exploring was accompanied by me timing my jumps to the beat of the music, like the entire game. That's half the fun of the entire package. The adventure begins with the crew all getting invited to enjoy a peaceful holiday over on Pillow Island, and Luigi almost dies. Happy Year of Luigi, everybody. On their flight, an evil pillow falls onto the blimp and this huge dark figure pops out. Oh no, but it's okay. It's dealt with in like 5 seconds. Huh. Oh, but it ends up messing up the blimp and now everybody's gonna die. Oh, but it's okay. That was all just a dream Luigi was having? What's going on at the start of this game here? I'm so confused. As Mario and Luigi explore Pillow Island, taking part in some of the festivities, they eventually travel to the underground section of Pillow Castle, where they stumble upon a special looking pillow. And not wasting a single second, Luigi does the quick math in his head and decides to take a nap on it. I respect those priorities, but you actually don't know where that pillow's been. By doing so, this somehow summons a crazy looking portal over his head, and this mysterious aura manages to suck in Princess Peach. Okay, naturally Mario jumps in right after her, leading into the mythical Dream World. And while they are unable to save Peach at this time, they do discover a new helper character in the form of the formerly imprisoned Prince of the Pillow People, Dreambert. He's a big old dork. And from there, the adventure to save Peach, rescue the remaining Pillow People scattered throughout the lands, and solve the mysteries of that shadow creature as you explore all of Pillow Island, as well as their respective dream worlds, begins. Soon after, we also learn of the Dream Stone and the Dark Stone, artifacts made up of people's happy dreams and scary nightmares, respectively, and both have the ability to grant its users wishes. So, there you go. There's the motivation. But yeah, that's basically the entire plot, and honestly, it's a bit underwhelming in my opinion. Bowser eventually shows his face and teams up with that shadow creature, whose name is Phantasma by the way, which is kind of a neat dynamic I guess, but it's also hard for me to take Bowser as a serious threat in a Mario and Luigi game after seeing him get fat in the last one. It's almost as if, despite bringing back a bunch of characters, it's kinda like the last adventure never happened. A true shame because that last game handled continuity with Fawful so well. Like, Popple is here for some reason. You remember that one mini-boss who was pretty funny in Superstar Saga and then didn't show up in the next 2 games? Well, he's here now, and he has no recollection of the bros, and after a battle with the Wiggler near the end of the game, he just disappears, never to be seen again, and spoilers, he doesn't show up in the sequel. Why was he here? And on top of all of that, regarding Phantasma, you may have not known what he was at the start of the game, but you legit take him out within the first 5 minutes of the story. And it's not like when you fought Cackletta halfway through Superstar Saga and then fought a stronger form at the end. That first Phantasma fight is super similar to the final encounter. He doesn't even become all that much more threatening throughout the adventure, so it's just a bunch of strange choices all around. Also, the way I see it, the entire dream thing is inherently not as interesting as the last game's premise. Granted, it would be very hard to combat traveling through Bowser's... Oh no. But man, if these are truly Luigi's dreams, then he's got nothing interesting going on in that noggin of his. There's a slight message of self-confidence here with Luigi wanting to prove his worth to his much more accomplished brother, which we do only get to see deep within his dreams, and it is a nice touch, but it doesn't really get that much deeper than that. That's the equivalent of like the journal that Luigi keeps hidden in Paper Mario. I don't know, man, if you really wanted to show Luigi's dreams, maybe show his true reactions to constantly being the butt of everyone's jokes. That'd be something. That's a running gag throughout the entire franchise. Near the end of Partners in Time, where this big star gives Mario words of encouragement and praise, he then looks to Luigi and says, good luck out there. He's a savage, dude. At the very least, I would have expected some, like, Luigi's Mansion references or something. You know, I imagine he sees booze in his sleep every night as it is, but nothing here. The dreams just end up becoming watercolor versions of the areas he fell asleep in. Easily, the best thing this gives to the players is the ability to fondle Luigi's face whenever he's sleeping. It is tied to special moves in the game, but you can do it whenever you want. I mean, yeah, we all fantasized about experiencing this gameplay mechanic, right? Ultimately though, those are pretty minor issues. The game is still super funny at times, which is what the series does best. Again, nothing really as outlandish as some of the best moments of Bowser's Inside Story, but still good. The real problem though comes in the game's pacing. The main focus of the story gets established relatively early on, not much really happens on the journey towards that destination, and any moments where stuff does happen takes far too long to get to. Dream Team is a long adventure, man. A basic playthrough took me 28 hours, as opposed to Bowser's Inside Story, which took me a mere 17. And in my opinion, the story simply isn't there to pick up the slack. What we have here isn't bad, but it's hard to get even slightly invested in what's going on here. It feels like they wanted to make this sequel longer just for the sake of it. And that mentality kinda bleeds into the gameplay as well, but nowhere near as severely. We are 4 games into this series at this point. Yeah, the game plays exactly like all the rest. You run around a bunch of different lands as the bros, and each of them get a respective button to call their own for specific actions, like jumping and swinging a hammer. You touch an enemy so you can jump into a battle where that same 2-button approach applies. This is all a tried and true system, and it is still fun here. It controls a lot smoother too, upgrading to the circle pad on the 3DS and having that smooth 360 control, oh, it feels great. And when we return to the dream world, we see the return of side-scrolling, mimicking the style of exploring Bowser's disgusting insides, which is also where fondling Luigi finally has a purpose. Oh, thank God. Throughout the different dream worlds are chances to throw Dreamy Luigi into the background, which allows you to manipulate the environment by just doing the most unspeakable things to a sleeping person while keeping the game rated E. You mess with a few platforms thanks to a sneeze, you fling Mario around with Luigi's elastic mustache, spin a drill around by breaking Luigi's nose. We can also multiply Dreamy Luigi to a ton of copies to move throughout the environments in different ways. Just mowing down hordes of enemies that dare stand in your path. It's pretty satisfying. There's no part of the game where these things get remotely challenging, but it's at least a solid use of the touchscreen. Messing around with Luigi's face to benefit yourself, this is clearly the influence for the romancing options in Fire Emblem Fates. And undeniably, the best thing Dream Team brings to the table is the dreamy battle system. Okay, so like I said before, if you played one Mario and Luigi battle, you've essentially played them all. Enemies have specific tells requiring specific inputs for dodging. There are special bros moves that take proper timing to get right. Yeah, it's the same as it's always been. It's fine, it works. There's some motion controls this time around, that's kind of cool, but yeah, it's the same. It's the same thing. They did ruin the Fire Flower though. Now you have to wait for the ball to get big and then you just press the button once. It does completely eliminate the potential for carpal tunnel, which is appreciated, but it's not as satisfying to pull off. And only one screw-up knocks you out of an entire all-out attack? Yeah, no, this one sucks now. But once we're in the dream world, Dreamy Luigi essentially fills Mario with his essence, allowing him to harness the power of dozens of Luigis for every attack, doing a lot more damage, as well as being able to take down a bunch of enemies all at one time. You only get a single action per turn now as opposed to two, but you always do a lot more damage than before. And the special moves, now called Luiginary attacks, very clever, are so much fun to pull off. If anything, maybe I would say some of these moves go on for far too long, and that time really does add up since it makes sense to use these moves a bunch, but I thought they were fun from start to finish, so that's hardly a complaint. It kind of makes the normal battle system feel so dull by comparison. The badge system that was in Bowser's Inside Story is a whole lot more prominent this time around, but that applies to both battle types, so even then, the standard battles once again feel a bit lacking. It's just not as successful of a dynamic as the Bros and Bowser, but this still totally works. Also, the music for both battle types is fantastic, so that definitely helps. And speaking of piggybacking off of Bowser's Inside Story, giant battles are back as well. If you recall, I said I thought that they were just okay before. Definitely cool thematically, but you had limited options that left a lot to be desired in my opinion. And I am happy to say that it's been totally fixed here. Giant battles in Dream Team play out like proper boss fights, where you have to consistently assess the situation and figure out which move is best at the right time. That's all I wanted. A lot of it is still doing the obvious quick time event when the game tells you to, but there was clearly a lot more thought put into them this time around. As blatant as Dream Team is at ripping off Bowser's Inside Story, this I approve of. It's certainly a whole lot better than... oh man, we'll get to it. Also, luckily, once again, there are side quests aplenty to dig into. From a trading sequence in the main city, photos that you find throughout the land that you can then solve yourself, skill challenges for all of the different special moves, a super difficult gold beanie enemy that is really rare to find and gives you a ton of XP if you manage to defeat it, hidden floor beans, again? Okay, listen, I get it. Having hidden items spread throughout the world makes a lot of sense, and at least bean people do show up in this game, but come on now. This over-reliance on beans is getting to be a bit much. It's getting a bit gassy in here, don't you think? There's even, for the first time ever, an unlockable hard mode after beating the game once. That's pretty neat. It doesn't solve any of the pacing issues with the game, so I wasn't really thrilled at the idea of doing a second run immediately after the first one, but hey, still nice. And this is all very cool stuff. Mechanically speaking, Dream Team does a lot of good, but again, the pacing ruins all of the excitement nearly every single time a brand new mechanic shows up. The tutorials, dude, oh my god, the tutorials, Dreambert, would you just shut the hell up? Oh, the game just can't help itself, man. Rather than giving you the chance to, I don't know, figure something out for yourself, you always get stopped in your tracks to be told how to do literally everything in the game. It's crazy. Dream Team has become sort of infamous for the amount of tutorials found within. And man, on this playthrough, I can confirm wholeheartedly that what you've heard is true. I don't know what was wrong with the idea of throwing up a text box that had the controls on it, and then you move on. It also kinda stings a whole lot more after playing the other 3DS games that included the ability to fast forward cutscenes. That is simply not a thing here. Honestly, if Nintendo would have taken the time to patch that in after the fact, it would have done the game a world of good. And you wanna know the insane thing? There is one ability that doesn't give you a tutorial. I thought it crashed or something. Man, I got this new power and the game just let me play with it on my own. Why? It sounds like hyperbole when you say it out loud, but the tutorials constantly kill the pace of the game. While later uses of the mechanics are totally fine, and when the game lets you play at your own pace, it is great, but it would be a whole lot better if Dreambert would just keep his pillowy mouth shut. And just overall, while Dream Team is totally mechanically sound, there are so many of these little annoyances that keep popping up so constantly, it kinda muddies up the entire game. There are so many fetch quests in this game, regularly putting you in direct sight of your end goal, but oh man, we're missing the 5 things required to make this thing work, so just run around on these different points on the map to get them, that's fine. This actually happens quite often, causing most of these areas to feel like they're overstaying their welcome. Some of the puzzles, like this really stupid tile one, take way too long to solve, even though the solutions are incredibly straightforward. It took me nearly 13 hours of gameplay time for fast travel to finally unlock, which is absolutely ridiculous. While it can be fun to use, there is a bit too much reliance on the touchscreen for basic maneuvering in the dream world for my liking. Sometimes I want to just move from one platform to the other, but oh man, gotta jiggle the nose for a little bit first. And the same thing goes for some of the motion controls in the Bros moves. A couple of them just didn't work as I would hope, and it caused me to not do as much damage as I wanted to, and I would just do a different move instead. In general, I feel like the developers really focused in on taking advantage of the 3DS's newer capabilities, rather than solely focusing on making the game fun first and foremost. I mean, when I found equipment that powers you up on your birthday, and one that increases power based on how many steps you took that day, okay, that's when I knew. Oh, don't mind me. I'm just grinding in an RPG. Dream Team is definitely a good game, but it is totally lacking in focus. Hey, we have much more powerful hardware now. We gotta make the game a whole lot longer, and we gotta cram in as much new technology as we possibly could. And the final product, overall, it's just kinda meh. Admittedly, at the time of its initial release, I remember not even thinking about any of the complaints that I have now. My old save file here has everything completed 100%, so clearly I just loved that we had a new 3DS game at the time. I also spent 40 hours in this game, holy cow, I surprised myself. So based on that information, what I think I would say is on its own, played in short bursts, a lot of the issues I mentioned earlier probably won't matter. But it's only when coming right off the heels of the previous games where the shortcomings are a whole lot more apparent. But what if I told you that by the end of the adventure, AntTasma gets fat? Aw, hell yeah, dude. Eventually, AntTasma and Bowser get their hands on the Dreamstone. Surprise, surprise. As their one major wish, they get a massive castle encased in an impenetrable field, and the only way to get through is to summon the Great Z-Keeper, a majestic, powerful, incredibly large and beautiful rainbow bird who is like incredibly chill, dude. Like, wow, what? Okay, I like him a whole lot. With a special beam of energy from the Z-Keeper, they succeed in breaking down the castle shield. And now it's time to enter Neo Bowser Castle. Probably named after Neo Bowser City from Mario Kart 7. That's nice, dude. I really like that track. Oh yeah, that's right. The Elite Trio are here too. Man, for being original characters based on Mario enemies, something similar to characters you would find in Paper Mario, these guys really don't get as much screen time as they should. They don't show up in the sequel either, so this is all we get from them. That's missed potential. And yes, we're traveling through Bowser's Castle once again, this time lacking much of the interesting theming all of the previous adventures had. Not a terrible final dungeon, I just missed the smiles of Fawful from Bowser's Inside Story and the cool implications of being in Peach's castle in Partners in Time. But soon enough, our heroes make it to the top of the castle for our final few encounters. Oh hey, look at that, Bowser's eating a lot of food. That's a reference? I think. First up, we got a giant Bowser battle. Again, big fan of these, and this is no different. Really fun time. The end of the battle is like Bowser and Luigi spinning a bunch and you gotta knock each other off the field. It's like, what, I'm playing Beyblade now? Okay. Luigi, let it rip. And then we battle Antasma, who is fairly difficult, I'll give him that, and it's in the dream world this time, so we get to use all those cool abilities. But man, I cannot get over it being so identical to the first 5 minutes of the game. That's so weird! Paper Mario 64 did do something really similar, but at least the first fight in that game is unwinnable, so it made sense, and it made the following encounter a whole lot more epic. Here, you kind of just use the same strategies that you used at the start of the game, just more. And there's this weird motion controlled dodging minigame that you play to avoid some attacks, and that's not really fun, and it happens often, and that's, man, it's not that good. But the real final fight takes place after Bowser foolishly eats the Dream Stone, transforming him into Dreamy Bowser. Dreamy? Despite just being a different form of Bowser for like the 4th time now, this is a really solid final boss. I mean, Bowser's basically a god in this one. It is slightly more intimidating than whatever Bowletta was trying to be. The music is fantastic. You got some massive attacks that are pretty difficult to avoid. You gotta take out both hands before attacking the center to deal the most damage. Oh, it's just like the Cackletta Soul fight all over again. Huh. Better than Partners in Time, though. A few good hammer swings later, Bowser blasts off again, and Peach is finally saved. Z-Keeper to the rescue as the castle crumbles under everybody's feet, and after touching down back on Pillow Island, he transforms the recaptured Dream Stone into a Dream Coin, spawning infinite money for all of the villagers to buy their wishes instead of simply relying on a mere object and hoping for them to come true. So the moral of the story here is money is the true key to happiness. The end of the game is... it's okay. As I said before, much of the game tends to drag on, and the build up to the final encounter isn't super strong anyway, so while the final battle is really cool, thanks especially to the sweet music, I was honestly more so relieved to have it finally over with rather than invested in what was going on and satisfied by what happened. The journey to get there can be pretty enjoyable at times, but I felt pretty drained by the time I got to the destination, unlike, again, Bowser's Inside Story. Okay, listen, I know there's been a ton of comparing going on here between these two games, but I can't help it. Alpha Dream did such a fantastic job with Bowser's Inside Story, and rather than having Dream Team feel like a proper evolution of the formula, it feels more so like they wanted to find a way to do a lot of the same stuff all over again without explicitly reusing the same ideas. The graphics and the soundtrack are top-notch. I do prefer the looks and sounds of the previous games, but it's hard to complain about what we actually have here. And when I look back at my time with Dream Team, I just remember an adventure that feels unnecessarily longer, filled with a ton of obtrusive tutorials. There was an antagonist that wasn't very intimidating, Bowser was a bad guy again, which I really couldn't take seriously, and the primary gimmick of Luigi going to sleep feels like it never met its full potential. We have a game here that is fun, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of good things about this, but there is too much holding this game back from true greatness in my eyes. Patch in the ability to fast forward cutscenes, Nintendo. I know you don't care about the 3DS anymore, but come on. Come on. But in the grand pantheon of the Mario and Luigi series, I would probably put Dream Team right up there with Partners in Time. Not a bad game, but definitely near the bottom of the list. If you want to play it for yourself, it'll still be fun, but be prepared to have your hand held with tutorials the entire time. Dreambird needs to shut the hell up.